Happy Friday and welcome to Career Launch Live. I am your host, Catherine McCord, and today we are going to be talking about boundaries. Boundaries, boundaries, boundaries. How to set them, when to set them, why we need them, all the things about boundaries. And I cannot think of a more appropriate guest for this episode than the boundary queen herself, Miss Dana. So, Miss Dana, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you, Catherine. I'm so excited. This is going to be fun, fun, fun. I'm very passionate about boundaries. I have a master's degree in clinical psychology, and I've had a private practice for about 15 years, 16 years or something like that. Plus, I have a podcast of my own, and also some not just personal experience with all of my patients that kept coming in, and I was noticing how many times that their issues were really boundary based.
Yes.
But I also have a personal background. I have a very, we'll call it interesting relationship with my mother, and she has some interesting struggles. And I basically had to use boundaries, and still do, to navigate and survive that relationship. And I went through a lot of stuff there. So I understand. I haven't taught my patients anything that I haven't gone through.
Right, exactly. And we do share that, not with my mother, but we do have I do have a lot of family members actually that I have to set very hard boundaries with. And there are just very strong constructs to keep the relationship healthy and functional. And sometimes, every once in a while, the boundary moves to you're cut off. Now you're gone. And maybe that can move again. They're always flexible. My boundaries are always flexible.
Yes.
But that's very much a thing. And then also in the workplace, I've had to set a lot of boundaries, and especially working in HR stuff, right? I have to do a lot of helping people set boundaries. So we're just going to kind of cover this topic from A to Z. So if anybody has any questions, just a reminder, we are live, so we are able to answer your questions live for you. So feel free to chime in. So Dana, when people think about boundaries, sometimes they get kind of clenched and they feel like boundaries mean that they're shutting people away, or they're being unkind, or they're not giving grace. So how do you define boundaries to people and help them to feel more comfortable with the concept?
That is an amazing question. So basically, in a nutshell, if you think about, look at the analogy of yards. I use that a lot when I train. So if you think about a typical suburban neighborhood, and let's just
hold on, I was thinking football yards. Like I was like,
yeah.
Sorry, that just cracked me up. Go ahead.
So imagine that you're in like a typical suburban neighborhood, and for the sake of analogy, there's a fence between each yard. And so in your yard are your thoughts, your feelings, your opinions, and your actions. And what is not in your yard, what is across the fence line in someone else's yard, is someone else's thoughts, someone else's feelings, and someone else's actions. And so when you understand this and you practice healthy boundaries, you actually become very peaceful. Some of the most peaceful people I know are the ones that have a very good understanding of boundaries, because they don't get all wrapped up in trying to get someone else to feel some kind of way.
Right.
To get somebody else to do some kind of thing. And they also feel comfortable communicating their own thoughts and feelings, because they know they have a right, and I could easily argue a responsibility to do that, to communicate those things, because other people can't read our mind. Right. It's not their job to read our mind.
Whoa. You mean that everybody else can't just tune in and hear exactly what's going on in my head, so that I don't have to worry about being clear about my what? I tell you, it is funny though how many people are actually living under the assumption that everyone else just knows what they're thinking, because they think it's like this it's an inherent bias, right? That we think everybody else thinks and feels what we do because that's our experience. It's like, oh, my experience must be everybody's experience. No.
That's exactly it.
No.
No, and I mean, we could argue in some instances, like say, for example, if it's a dating scenario or a husband and wife or partner scenario, should the other person know that they need to help out with this? Should they understand they need to take out the trash? You could argue that maybe they should figure that out. But the thing of it is,
Maybe.
if you can't let it go, your choice is basically, if you want to be healthy, you either let it go or you engage in conversation about it.
Right.
But see,
Right.
people do that. They neither let it go nor do they engage in conversation about it. And when that happens, it creates resentment and bitter.
Yes.
So we start getting all resentful of what the other person is doing, and they have no idea usually what's
Yeah.
going on inside of us.
No.
We haven't said
Because
anything.
again, mind readers, like you can't be. And even if they sense that something's off, they may not realize it has anything to do with them. They may not understand what the topic is. So the best thing that you can do is clear communication. And I'm so glad that you hit on that up front, Dana, is that we have to be clear and remember that other people will not process stimuli and information the same way that we do.
Right.
That other people will not have the same experience, will not have the same knowledge. They won't even have the same perspective based on their own experiences through life. Because that's how we build our personality, is everything that happens to us. Well, nobody has the same experience, so every human is unique. So first of all, don't assume. I think that's lesson number one about boundaries. Stop assuming. Stop assuming anything. Just don't assume ever. It never goes well.
Like to your point, everyone has their own point of view.
Yeah.
And they have a right to that because they have a different background.
Yes.
They have a different personality. And so it's our job to communicate how we feel. If we can open up conversation about something, then we might understand that, wait a minute, I thought you understood this. And then you're like, we don't have the same understanding of this. Oh, okay. Nope. So then we can actually do something about that.
Right. Yeah. And even to liken it to the professional world, this happens a lot between employer and employee, between a leader and a member of the team. This disconnect of expectations versus what is actually happening. And it's really kind of crazy, right? Like that there's not more communication, especially in the workplace, because it's like, well, duh, obviously, like be extremely clear and make sure that what you're saying is what's actually being received. So one of the things I always like to do as a leader, and I'd love your thoughts on this, Dana, is I like to have people, when I would communicate with my team, with my staff, or however you want to call it, I would ask them, okay, so tell me back what I said so I can make sure we're on the same page. I'm sorry, you're breaking up a little bit, Dana.
Okay.
Ooh, we lost Dana for a bit. I'm sure she'll be right back. We're having a little bit of connectivity, weather issues, things like that. These things happen. So while Dana is out, I'll just kind of talk a little bit more about that. So as you're building better communication, one of the key things that you want to do is use curiosity, not ego. So that ego is that part that will say, well, you must get it because, I was so clear. You're assuming that this other person has the same understanding, is on the same wavelength that you are, but we very rarely are. So always responding in curiosity is a lot more effective way to communicate with other humans. So I was just talking about responding in curiosity, not ego. But go ahead and whatever answer you're about to give, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah. Well, I think the weather around here is causing some issue. We've got this huge winter storm blast.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It's okay. It's okay. Weather happens. The other day I was on a show and I kept being thunder in the background. I was like, it's very dramatic and ominous.
Live. We just go. You just roll with it. Whatever.
Yeah, whatever it is. It's okay.
I'll pop off. I'll be back on. No worries.
No worries.
So okay. I like the tactic that you said, and I frequently give that to my patients when they're having relationship issues, to say, okay, what I heard you say was.
Mm-hmm.
And so that gives us an opportunity to make sure that what we thought we communicated was actually heard the way we thought we said it.
Right.
And so, because if somebody says, if we say blah, 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 and the other person says, well, what I just heard you say was, and we're like, no, let me start over. That's not, if that's what you heard me say, that's not what I meant. So
Right.
let me try again. Let me try another way of explaining this. And so
Yeah.
that what I heard you say is an amazing communication
Amazing tool.
strategy.
It works so very well, and there's nothing wrong with asking for people to mirror that.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
hey, would you mind, repeat so I can make sure I was clear? And you can always take it on yourself. I can make sure I was clear. I was communicating clearly, because that is ultimately what you're doing. You want to make sure that you've been heard appropriately, and it's really funny because a lo- I do a lot of work around neurodiversity, as you well know, Dana. And there's a lot of times when you're communicating with people in the neurodiverse community, when their brain has gone off somewhere else based on something that you've said, or they're already making plans for things that you said. And so by the time that you're done talking, they're hearing you, but it's still like their brain has gone to 50 other things. Well, then what they've received might have been altered by the fact that they're now 10 steps ahead, which is a great talent, but you want to make sure that you're all aligned. So it's still a great idea, even for inclusion purposes, to just do this kind of touch point and make sure that you're on the same page. Another way you could do this is by sending things in writing. And making sure, and making it bullet pointed. Don't send people long paragraphs and
Oh
essays. That's
gosh.
freaking ridiculous. No, bullet points, and to make sure, short bullet points, to make sure that everything is concise, and have them reply, ask questions, add to it, whatever you need to do, to make sure that you are staying in a cohesive path. Because otherwise you just end up like in lunacy. And I see it all the time in the workplace. Like people that have just like they've done one project, but their boss wanted something else entirely. And I'm like, this was a communication problem. That's what this was. So you're communicating effectively, right? So how do we use those boundaries? So I heard a situation that I want to ask you about, Dana, especially with your psychology background. I really want to get your perspective on this one. So an employer in fact, we just heard about this last week on the show. So an employer has two employees, one of whom is very verbally aggressive, and can even sometimes, not to the point of like physical attack in terms of hitting, but can get very physical with their aggression, like standing over people to yell at them, shaking their hand in their face, this type of thing. If you were, first of all, the employee receiving this, how would you set the boundary? And then if you were the employer, how would you set boundaries with this human?
Okay, let's start as a peer. Okay, you're an employee, and this is a fellow employee that's doing this. I would start with words. I would say, I would be very descriptive and clear. I would describe the behavior. I would say, I wouldn't be like personal attacking a personality, but I would say, I get uncomfortable whenever you are standing very close to me, when you are leaning over me to where I have to tilt my head back to look at you. It makes me uncomfortable when you come in and you put your hands on my papers, on my desk. Just be very specific. When you raise your voice to where you're almost screaming,
right,
that makes me uncomfortable. So you're talking about your own feelings, which those are in your yard. So you have a right to those. And you're discussing this employee's behavior.
right.
Okay. When you do this, when you do this, when you do this. Now, here's the thing. You start out with words. Usually people that are going to behave this way don't really care what you think. They don't care how you feel. So you can say those things and they're going to be like, meh, and they're just going to keep doing it.
Yeah.
You have to back it up with behavior. So you can explain and say, you know what? The next time you come and you behave in these ways with me, I am going to get up and walk away from you. Because think about boundaries being like, if you fill in the blank, then I fill in the blank. Because we can't control what the other person is going to do, but neither can they control how we're going to respond. So we can say, okay, if you choose to, and these are why the words are important, because you've already said, when you do these very specific behaviors, it makes me uncomfortable. I don't like it. So you've already said that, so they know it. And you say, if you choose to continue to do these things, that when you do it, I'm going to get up and walk away from you.
Yeah. And which is
I
a
will not,
healthy and safe response.
yes, I will not speak with you. I will not engage in
Mm-hmm.
conversation with you. I will not answer any question that you have. I will
Yep.
simply walk away. So if you want anything from me, if you want to engage in conversation, if you want to tell me something, if you want an answer from me, if you want any kind of collaboration, then you're going to learn very quickly. You're not going to get it that way, because as soon as you do that, I'm walking away.
Right. And I
So it's
want to
kind of
add
like
to
a
this
behavior modification.
100%. And then you have to take that action. You
Yes.
have to actually live it. So then when this person approaches you and they start yelling,
Which they will.
Or throwing papers or whatever the world it is that they're doing, which they will,
Which they
just
will.
get up quietly,
Walk away.
turn and walk away.
Yes.
Even if it's your desk, just walk away.
Just walk away.
And here's what you do. You send, and from an HR perspective, then send a follow-up email with your manager and or HR CC'd visibly, and say, I know you just came to my desk. You wanted to talk about XYZ. As per our previous conversation, because you did this, I did this. So as soon as we're ready to regroup and have a professional conversation that's in a respectful tone and that's within the boundaries that I've set, I'm happy to collaborate with you. What that does is that protects you, saying, it's not that I'm trying to avoid my work. I just need them to act right, and that sets that boundary. And before we move on to the employer, I want to ask you, because this is one of the things that I teach, so I want to get your opinion, and feel free to tell me I'm wrong. I do not mind. So one of the things that I teach in my handling the jerk class is I say, when somebody is doing something especially aggressive towards you, to put your hand, and your elbow should still be able to touch your chest when you do this. You're not like trying to get up in their space. Put your hand up and say no. And that just usually will stop them in their tracks. Like, what? And then you can do the rest of everything that we just said, because the rest of that's like right on par. But in order to stop the action, just put up your hand and say no, because sometimes you need to stop an action that may be unsafe for you, and so we actually need it to stop immediately.
Okay.
Dana, are you there? Are you halfway frozen?
Yeah.
Oh, I think the storm's got you again.
Okay, I can see you.
You sound like a robot. If you go back out and come back in, I think it'll be okay. I think we'll be all right. We'll just try this again. We're having technical issues. Like, I feel like we need like a really cool like tech issues like little visual there.
Can you see me?
Nope. You're gonna have to go back out and come back in, Dana. Log back out and come back in. And now my cat has opinions about this issue. Okay, so when dealing with the jerk, that's one thing that's very highly important, is to put up that hand and say no. So if somebody's doing something that's an attack on you, make sure that they understand, we're not accepting this, and then set your boundary, because you want to protect yourself. You'll also, of course, anytime something like this happens, you will want to follow up with your manager and with HR, and make sure that they understand that your boundary is not negotiable. You have that right as an individual. You do not have to negotiate your boundaries for safety or anything else when you are at work. So Dana, I don't know if you could hear that, but I was just saying that you do not need to, that you can go to HR and management and make sure that everybody's on the same page, but that you do not need to negotiate your boundaries that you have set for your safety and your well-being with your employer. That's not a negotiable. No, this is my boundary. Period. What are your thoughts? I think we've lost Dana again. This is not going well. Weather will get us sometimes. So that's okay until Dana can come back. At least she has a very lovely pose. Like, she's frozen in a very dignified position. So that's good. So when you're addressing this with your employer, it's very important to, again, be clear about your boundaries. So as you approach HR and management, say, this is what happened. This is how I handled it. These are the things that these are the things that, thank you, Susan, for that suggestion. That's very kind. So go ahead and so as you're talking to them, say, these are the things that are flexible. These are the things that are, and then these are the things that are my boundaries. Boundaries are not flexible in terms of other people telling you what your boundary is. Your boundaries are flexible internally, but your boundaries are not flexible externally. Other people don't get to move your boundaries. You do. That is up to you. So you get to make sure that you are safe and that you are well at all times. And again, with an employer, it's just a matter of making sure that they understand that you are still willing to do your job. You just need to be within the bounds of safety and wellness, and that these are your personal boundaries for those purposes. And so that's how we move on with that and address that with the employer. So I was just talking about more about talking to your employer about it and kind of engaging with them. But I would love your feedback about the no aspect, when somebody has attacked at you, and to say no to them
Well,
in
and
that
that
moment.
gets back to your behavior has to match your words.
Right.
So you can say no, but they might just ignore you.
Yeah, they
So
might.
you have to have a behavioral response to that. You have to have something that you're going to do behaviorally to back up your no. So
Hmm.
if you say you're going to get up and leave, for example, then you need to do that.
Hmm.
Don't ever say you're going to do something and don't do it, because then you're training them to ignore you.
Right.
So if you say,
Exactly.
if you do this, then I'm going to get up and leave, I guarantee you they're going to do it. I guarantee you you're going to have to get up and leave.
Yeah.
But if you're consistent with that and you assign that with your no, you're like, I've told you I'm not going to tolerate this. And don't,
Hmm.
the less words, the better. Once you've
Yes.
explained it, don't speak, just do it.
Just do the thing. Just do
Yep.
the thing.
Just do
Yeah.
the thing. You
Just
don't have
is
to
what it is.
justify it. You've already
It's
explained it.
it's kind of like with kids. It always makes me laugh because people will like, I'm gonna do this with you. If you do that, I'm gonna do this. If you do that, I'm gonna do. If you do it one more time, and they just keep negotiating with the kid. I'm like, no. Once you have said this is what's going
Mm-mm.
to happen if this
Do
behavior
it.
continues, do it.
Do
And
it
it's the same
immediately
thing with adults. It
and be
is the
consistent.
exact same thing. Yes,
And same, see
consistency.
that's why you don't have to get all jacked up and emotional, because you've already explained yourself. You've explained what you're going to do and why. You're very clear. And so all you're just doing it. Their emotions about it are in their yard. Those are not your emotions. If they get
That's their
upset about it,
problem.
that's not your problem. You just be consistent with what you're doing, like this.
Yes, absolutely, 100%. So we have a great and yeah, you have to, with whether it's your kid, your boss, your freaking dog. I mean, good grief, you have to do it with animals. Literally everybody.
Yes.
Do what you say you're going to do, and be
Mhm.
consistent in your action. Excellent advice to walk away, but what if it's the CEO who is bullying you? So, first of all, actually, this will still work. I know because I've done it. I have and multiple times, by the way, from a client perspective, where they were my client. I've done it when they were my boss, and I was their executive assistant. Um, is I've done this exact thing, and just said no. One of them, I even stopped taking his texts or anything. I said, I will speak to you again when you learn how to speak respectfully.
Mhm.
And this was my client, and we had this, but I mean, hard, just nope, we're not doing that. Now, a lot of people are afraid to lose their jobs, and a lot of people are afraid of unemployment.
Mhm.
But what you have to understand is when you set these boundaries, as long as you're being respectful, there's, what do they have? there's
Mhm.
there's not much. So, and you don't want to stay at a place like that anyway. So frankly, if that happens more than once, start looking for a job. But Dana, what are some options if somebody is in a situation where they're scared to lose their job, and this is the CEO, so like there's nobody higher to go to, outside of the board? By the way, you can always contact the board, because if there's a safety issue, that's a problem. But
Mhm.
outside of that, what are some other things that people can do to make sure that they're communicating in a friendly way and all of that, but then also protecting themselves as well?
Okay. So one thing is to know your value. First of all, realize that most bullies don't bully everyone equally. Think about like playgrounds. Okay. When you're watching someone behave like a bully, you're actually watching a child inside of them behave, because that's not how a healthy adult is going to behave. That's a younger version of themselves that is kind of like taking over, like you might
Oh, Dana froze again. Oh no. Here we go. This is just the episode of technical errors. It's okay. So, um, but she's right that mature people do not respond this way, and knowing your value is absolutely paramount. So, in one conversation that I had at one point with I wasn't a CEO, but it was a VP of a company that was my boss, is they were acting out and being kind of a jerk. And I said, it's really interesting to me that you would pay me as much as you do and then speak to me that way. And they tried to come back to me and said, you pay me that much because I'm worth it and because I know what I'm doing and because I'm a great team member. Yes? Yeah, yeah, that's true. That's true. Okay. So reminding them of your worth, reminding them of who you are and why you're there can shut that down, and making sure that they understand that, yeah, okay, you forgot who you're talking to. Come on, calm down with that mess. So just reminding them of who you are and reestablishing your value with them can make such a difference. It absolutely can. So that's my advice. I hope Dana pops back on and we're able to hear hers. But so reestablishing your value and then bringing it back and requiring respect. That is my response to that. Dana, are you with us?
Yeah.
Please finish your answer.
Yeah. This weather is nuts, this crazy winter
You're
storm.
okay. You're okay.
So the bullies don't bully everyone equally. So when you come in and you know your worth and you can address the CEO and say, this is what I have to offer you. If you continue to blah, 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 speak to me in this way, do this kind of thing, then, I may have to see who else would be interested in what I have to offer. But I really like working here. I enjoy what I'm doing here. If you would like for me to continue to work here, then let's work together and be very specific. And see, when you set healthy boundaries and you're not concerned about the other person's emotions, you can be calm because you are only responsible for your own.
Yes.
And when you kind of come in calm and respectful and say, this is what, like you said earlier, I'll be happy to receive your texts until 5 o'clock.
Right.
And point out the things that you're willing to do. I'll be
Yes.
happy to work on an extra project, which requires some extra hours, every other Saturday for several hours, instead of
Right.
saying, I'm not going to do this and I'm not going to do this, instead of pointing all that out, point out what you're willing to do. What are your parameters, and say, these are the things that I'm happy to do for you. I have a lot of value here. This is what I bring.
Yes.
And these are my boundaries. And then when he or she starts to push you outside of those boundaries, because they will, you have to just stick with your boundaries. Don't even respond.
Right. 100%. 100%. Reestablish your value and stick with those boundaries. And always, and like she said, always say what you're willing to do. And the same thing if you have that boss that just keeps giving you too many projects. We've all had that. That's just like, here's more, here's more, here's more. Set those boundaries. Come with them and go, hey, you give me all these projects. Thank you so much. I am so excited that you have so much faith in me. I'm so excited to do more for the company. I do want to discuss, possibly you might want to bring up extra pay because now you're at a new level of your career. You might want to talk about the hours worked. When you brought me on, this was a 40-hour position. Now I'm up to about 60. That's a little heavy for me. Is this short term? I'm happy to help out at this level short term. If it's long term, maybe we could consider bringing in somebody part time, just kind of discuss that and set those boundaries that way. But start by telling them thank you and how excited you are for their faith in you, because that is ultimately what they're showing you, that they trust you, that they value you, that they know that you can help out.
Well, and that's not uncommon for someone who's just really a rock star in what they do, because the boss sees so much potential and they want just to give them more and more and more. A lot of time for those of us who are really exceptional at what we do, we've got to set those boundaries because they just want more and more and more of that. And you're like, woohoo, I'm willing to do it to this point. And you see, because think of it this way, there's one person on this entire planet who has been given the responsibility of keeping you together. Just one. And if you don't do that, then your wheels start getting wobbly. then you're not going to be any good as an employee. You're not going to be any good as a partner. Not going to be any good as a parent. You're not going to be any good as a sibling. You're not going to be any good as a friend, because you're going like this. And that's no one else's responsibility but our own.
Right.
It's our job to keep our wheels attached so that we can in turn be a wonderful employee, a wonderful parent, a wonderful spouse, a wonderful partner, all those kinds of things. So we know where we need to set those boundaries.
Absolutely. That was great response. Thank you. And the last thing I want to address, this is a perfect lead in, so thank you, Dana, is internal boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
How much are you willing to give of this? When do you need to take a break? How much do you need of this? And then what needs to change for that? And then set those boundaries hard. For instance, I really value time with my partner, with my husband. That's a non-negotiable for me. Having that every single day is a non-negotiable. So at 6 p.m., you will not get me on the phone. You will not get anything. There are no meetings after this time. It is a hard stop at 6, because that's something that I value. And that's a boundary that everyone that works with me has to respect. Now, every once in a while, if something comes up and I've given notice about it, I will adjust, and that's fine. And that's okay. Or if there's a business dinner or something like that, but that's a rare occasion. But I have a very hard boundary. And I also set internal boundaries as it pertains to my health. So sometimes the boundaries are, what I will and will not eat, what I will and will not do, because I need to be able to protect myself. So when it comes to setting internal boundaries, Dana, what is your advice with that?
Okay, so things to keep in mind is that think of a person running a sprint versus a marathon. If somebody's going to run a sprint and they know they only have to go 100 yards, then they're going to go as hard as they can. But if they know they're going to run a marathon, they're going to pace because they want to complete the entire marathon. So it's like you have to think about that. What's your ultimate goal? Are you wanting to run as fast as you can for a short period of time, or are you wanting to keep going? Do you want to stay in the relationship? Do you want to stay at this company? Do you want to stay for the distance? If you do, then you need to pace yourself. And part of that is self-care. If you think about like a cellular membrane, a cell has to do two things. It has to push out toxins and it has to pull in nutrients to keep going. And that's our job. So think of self-care. We push out the toxins. That's what people talk about a lot. But what they don't talk about as much is the self-care, which is pulling in the nutrients. Do we need some time alone? Do we need some time to take a girls' trip, to a girls' weekend? Do we need some time with our spouse? Do we need some time? What do we need to self-soothe, to be able to self-care? What are those nutrients? And everybody's different.
Yeah. Oh, so, everybody.
But that's what we have to decide is what kind of nutrients do I need to pull in so I can keep thinking of ourselves as a cell. How do I keep functioning? I got to keep the toxins pushed out, and I got to keep pulling nutrients in so that I can keep going the distance.
Yes, exactly. I love it, the marathon. So Dana, thank you so very much. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you. Even in the midst of a storm, you joined us. And I just want to thank you for joining us, even in the middle of a very literal storm in your life.
Yes.
A very literal storm.
Yes, very literal.
So Dana, tell everybody as we wrap up your last advice and then how they can find you.
Oh gosh, last advice. If I could say one thing, I would say, let your yes be yes and your no be no.
Good one.
And put a period after that, not a comma. Okay. It doesn't need justification. Yep. Just let your yes be yes and your no be no. And if anybody wants to find me, they can go to Dana Skaggs, DanaSkaggs.com. There's like a free assessment they can take if they want to know, do I have boundary issues? I don't even know. They can take a free assessment to figure out, they get a score and see, do they have boundary issues or not? And there's, different things available about boundaries on that website.
That's cool. Yeah. And it is a cool website. I've been on Dana's site. Definitely go check it out. Highly recommend. She's also on LinkedIn. She's terrific. Connect her. You'll learn a lot. Listen to her show. I was on it, so it's awesome. Check out Dana's show. It really is very good. You'll take a lot from it. So real quick, tell them where to find the show.
The show is Phoenix and Flame. You can go to phoenixandflame.com, or you can go on Apple, all of the major, podcast platforms that they're on, Spotify, Deezer, all those kind of places.
Definitely check it out. Super cool. Thank you so very much, Dana. Join us same time, same place next week. New topic, always tons of fun. Everybody be great. And if you have more questions about setting boundaries, please reach out to either one of us. Have a great day. Happy Friday.